Alrighty, we are here with Dori Yona, co-founder and CEO of SimpleClosure, the most unique podcast interview I've ever done on the Wild Business Growth podcast because we were talking about wild business closures and all the like. But Dori, which I just learned is actually not short for Doriel, but long for Dor. So we can call you Dor as well. But Dori, thank you so much for joining. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. I feel like you have to rebrand your name for this episode to Wild Business Closure Podcast instead of Growth.
Yeah, the WBC. That's what we're here for. So definitely, I always strive to feature guests and wild entrepreneurs, as I say, who are doing out of the box things. And this is one of the most out of the box things I've ever talked about because it's not about growing your business. It's quite on the contrary. So we're gonna get to all things there. But before that, so you spent many years living in Israel as well as fighting for or working for, however you call it, serving for, rather, the IDF. And I saw you were a naval officer, some really, really cool things there. But what in the world was that like? Because I've heard of, anybody who grows up in Israel, there's kind of like the mandated service, if you will, for a few years. But 7 years, I feel like, is a little bit different. How did that unfold?
Yeah. It's a great question. I haven't talked about my IDF background for a while, so it's fun to revisit that part of my career. So I was I was born in Israel, but I grew up for the most part in the States. So when I was 8 months old, my family moved to the Bay Area. We grew up. I grew up there. When I was about 13, we moved back to Israel, and so I went to high school in Israel, and I ended up serving in the IDF in Israel. To your point. For those that don't know, like, military service is mandatory in Israel, and so traditionally it's like a 3-year service for men and 2-year service for women. I think that's changed a bit, and I think it's like 2.5 years for everyone today. That's kind of the mandatory service. Unless you go and do some kind of special program or go into some sort of special unit, in that case, typically the time in which you serve is different. It could be an extra year. It could be an extra 5 years. It could be sometimes an extra, 7-8 years in some cases. And so I ended up going down the path of becoming a naval officer and a captain of a battleship and eventually a captain of a platoon of ships. And so that process is about a 7.5-year process of minimum service. So I still have friends today that continued. So they're there already for almost 20 years. And they just continue their military career. But like at minimum, you have to do a 7.5-year service. And it's about 4 years of training to actually start to contribute back to the IDF and to the military. So it was like 4 years of training, and then about 1.5 years I was a captain of a battleship, and then another 1.5 years I was a captain of a platoon of ships. In between, I was a bit of time an instructor at the Naval Academy. So that ended up being 7 years, and I think you asked, like, how was it so long? Like, I didn't think about it being so long because usually these programs that you go that end up being more years, they're very, very, very tough to get into. And even if you get into them, the majority of the people don't pass training. So it's like kind of like, the Navy SEALs or whatever, like you start a program. So for our program, for example, originally before we even drafted, we started, there are tens of thousands of people that tried out for it, blah, blah, blah. But eventually the people that were drafted for this role, we started like 110 and actually finished the training. The amount of people that actually finished, I think we were like 32. That we actually finished, and so became naval officers, and so I never thought about the 7 years because I always thought I would be kicked out before the 4-year training ended, and then you're like, oh shit, I actually finished this training, and then you're like, okay, now I need to be an officer, now I need to be a captain of a ship. So I never really spent time thinking about it because I never thought I'd complete it because the odds are so low, and you just kind of like inertia gets to you.
So you're taking me way back because I've just always had a thing for like military history and like obviously like a lot of kids growing up, it's like you love war movies and all that stuff. And I totally forgot about this until you mentioned that you worked on a battleship. And I just like always had a thing for battleships growing up, and like I was in like Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and there was one thing we did. It was in the city of Buffalo, which is a few hours from Cleveland, where I grew up, and there was like a sleepover at a battleship in Buffalo.
Oh, that's cool.
And we did it. I don't remember if it was multiple times or just one year we did it, but like being a kid and being able to sleep over like in, like the barracks, and like you go to the mess hall and all that stuff. And it was really, really cool. But also it's like, man, it's tight quarters. Like you it's very tight quarters. You live
Very
on
intimate.
that. Yeah. But for you, like, how did you, it sounds like the training for that, especially for like to become a naval officer there, was like the ultimate weed out course. It's like so many people drop. Like, what do you think it was that actually kept you going and got you were one of the few people basically to actually make it to the end and actually serve in what you wanted to do?
Yeah, look, it's a very, very intense training course, and like I said, it's in total about 4 years. And I think like what they did really well in retrospect, the IDF, is it's not just a continuous four-year training. It's broken down into subsections of like, for 6 months we're focused on this, for 6 months we're focused on that, the next 6 months we're focused on this. And every 6 months I would say there was a specialty in which they are training you on, and they also are trying to weed out certain things in those periods of time. So for example, the first 6 months were very, 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 very physical. And very painful from an ocean or water perspective, I would say. So like in the first 6 months, I would say, which is a lot of the weeding out, because obviously the later they weed you out, the more they've invested in you. So like a lot of the weeding out is on the first ones, but the first are just really intense from a physical perspective. It's endless training, endless runs, endless like hikes in the mountains with weight on your shoulders. Or like every morning would start with like 3:30, 4 a.m. with a swim in very, very cold waters. And then once you got out of the water, you would actually have to stand for, I think, 10 minutes while the wind was blowing and you're just with Speedos.
Oh my God. That's
the
just
goal
cruel.
is to make, the goal is to make you quit, right? That is the goal. Like the first 6 months, their goal is mainly to familiarize and see how can you adapt to water and water circumstances. Like there's people that just like get on the water and they puke. Like no matter what they do, like they just get on a boat and they puke.
Yeah,
and so
I'm kind of halfway there. Yeah.
Yeah. So so the first 6 months is like just to make you quit. And anyway, and then the next 6 months are about like starting to understand if you have the qualifications to be a leader, because in the Navy, like a captain is by definition a officer and a leader. And then the next 6 months is mainly about how much can you study and cram, and like intense levels of like study, like nothing compared to anything I did in high school or university. So I think they like test different aspects of it. But bottom line, I think if like you look at every aspect that you're tested on or that you're trained on, I think it all leads back to the same core component that I think is true for at least the role that we did, which is like, it's all in your head. And if you realize that and you can cope with that, and you realize like, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how cold it gets, no matter how tired you are, we had weeks of training without sleep, like it's all in your head. And I think that like even studying, like you're like, you have a test, and if you don't pass it, like you're kicked out, and you're like, I cannot cram literally 4 books of knowledge in 2 weeks. Like it's impossible. You think it's impossible, and you realize that it's actually all in your head.
Well, it might be all in your head, but one of the little anecdotes you shared there was actually all in your Speedo. So standing when you're soaking wet, dealing with freezing cold wind, shout out George Costanza. That sounds like the biggest or littlest shrinkage situation ever. So you endured it all.
Yeah, exactly.
So making the decision to keep powering on, or close up shop and do something else, actually ties swimmingly to your business now. So SimpleClosure, let's get to that. And as we hinted at the start, totally different than any business we've ever had on this podcast. So really excited to dive into kind of the total opposite of growing your business.
Yeah.
How did this like how did you get into this? I'll call it like an obscure space.
Yeah. Don't feel bad. Like I get it all the time. A lot of people will ask me like, why the fuck would you start a company that helps companies shut down? Like how did you
You're
even?
like the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I think I more like to see us like we're not actually like one of the things that's the mission of the company is not about being like the Grim Reaper and it's we don't get pleasure as a company in like shutting down other companies. Like that doesn't bring us pleasure or pride as a business and as a team. It's actually about helping founders take this very painful process off their shoulders, giving them the peace of mind to move on to what's next. That's ultimately, I think, like what drives us as a business, us as a company, our mission. So I know sometimes I get we get the stigma of like the Grim Reaper, but I actually think if you speak to the founders that we've helped, it's like we are the breath of fresh air to them in this painful process. But to answer your question, how did we start SimpleClosure and how do we get to where we are today? The honest truth is because I've been through it and it sucks. Like that's the real honest answer. A bit of background about myself, like post IDF, I ended up getting into the world of tech and startups. SimpleClosure, the third company I founded, I've had the pleasure of selling a company. I've had the pleasure of shutting one down. And the process of preparing a company for shutdown was probably one of those most painful, bureaucratic, lonely, cumbersome processes I can think of a lot more adjectives.
I was gonna say, like, man, he's on a roll.
Yeah, I've been through my life. No one wants to help you. You're alone. It's ambiguous. Your lawyer doesn't want to help you. Your accountant doesn't want to help you. If you have investors, they've written you off and moved on. Your employees hate you. No one likes you in that situation. You have so much on your plate and you just want to make sure it's done right. And so going through that experience myself, seeing how painful it was firsthand, that's what sparked it in me. And then after that, I'm like, this can't be this hard for everyone, can it? Like, or another thing I asked myself was like, I'm probably the only person going through this because if I wasn't, there would be better solutions to doing this, right? And so after going through the process myself, I spent a lot of time researching the market and the space and also speaking to other founders that have been through this experience and entrepreneurs. And to summarize kind of the numbers, every year in the U.S., I don't know if maybe you did your research, but like if you had to guess how many companies shut down every year in the U.S., and if you did your research, then you'll just sound smart now.
I'm not gonna. I did do my research, but not on that specific point, so I won't sound smart. But I'm just gonna say it's a shit ton of companies.
Can you quantify what a shit ton is? What would you guess? Like 1,000,
one metric
10,
shit ton? No.
Yeah.
How many shut down a year? I would say it's in the either tens or hundreds of thousands, probably somewhere in between.
Okay, so the number of businesses shut down every year in the U.S. is between 700,000 and 1 million.
Okay,
that's the amount of companies.
See,
so,
I did not do my research.
Yeah, no, but you didn't sound. I've had people that said 5,000 in a year. So at least you're starting to be in the ballpark. Anyways, it's a huge number, astronomical. There are no good solutions for it. So like that was one eye-opening stat. And like if you think about certain industries like SMBs and tech, 93% of startups fail. Like statistically, like that's the numbers. If you look at SMBs, 80 to 90% of business shut down within the first 5 years, like in SMB world. So those are the numbers. And then if you ever have a chance to speak to founders or entrepreneurs that have been through the process, it's like the most painful thing that they've been through. And so it just the pain points of hearing customers go through it and hearing their challenges combined with like realizing how big the market and opportunity is ultimately what led us to start building SimpleClosure.
Yeah, and I rescind my Grim Reaper analogy. The breath of fresh air is much nicer. It's actually a breath of fresh air when you think about it from an analogy standpoint. So thank you for that. But I think often the connotation or denotation, whichever one of those is right, when it comes to closing down a business is negative. It's like if people hear about it, they're like, okay, something went wrong. Like there's a reason they're doing this. But can you shed some light on why like sometimes closing down a business may be the right decision for your
Yeah.
life?
Yeah. So, I'll talk about some of like the major use cases that we see, and then I'll talk about in general like other things that I've learned around like the right time. Um, First of all, we handle like there's three main reasons. I'll say four main reasons in which companies come to us to shut down. Number one, in no particular order, is they actually sold their company and they did an asset sale. And every case where, like, if you look at acquisitions, the majority of acquisitions that happen, there's two types of high-level acquisitions: a stock sale, where companies come and buy an entire company and the stock and the cap table and things like that. And then the second type is a asset sale, where they're coming and buying certain assets. That's the more popular one, especially like on the lower end of the market, and and so with an asset sale, you still need to shut down the shell entity. You're still responsible for it. That's one moment in time in which that's one example that come to us. Second example is we deal with a lot of like venture-backed companies, and so companies raise money, they're burning cash, they can't raise more capital, they try to raise a bridge and they can't, and so they have no other option. They're just out of cash and they need to shut down. So I would say that's like the second, just out of cash. The third use case is actually companies that are still operating. Sometimes they're cash flow positive. Sometimes they still have like money they've raised, hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions in the bank. And they decided to proactively shut down and wind up the business. And the reasons for that could be they've tried multiple times pivoting, couldn't find product market fit, and like just continuing to waste capital. And they're like, we actually don't think we can solve this problem. It could be founder dispute. It could be examples of they, especially in venture, like they raise at a certain valuation at like peak markets, and they just can't raise it higher valuations, and it's not worth continuing to build the business at, if there's no way to build a sustainable long-term business. That's another example. So I would say like those are some of the examples where companies are kind of preemptively or proactively shutting down. There's also like in S&P, a lot of people retire and they just shut down their business. So that's another example. And then I would say the fourth example of why we typically see companies shut down is a lot of people spin up companies pretty frequently because like, okay, I quit my job or I got fired and I'm now going to be a consultant for 6 months. And be, do something like this, and I want to spin up an LLC for that, or I want to spin up an entity for that, or I have an idea for a business I want to build, and let's just go to Stripe Atlas and spin up a company. But I never actually did anything with it. And then what people realize is there's a responsibility and liability when you start a company, and you owe taxes, and if you don't pay them, there's penalties and fines, and and so a lot of them just like shut them down because they're dormant. They actually never use them or never use them properly. So I would say those are the main reasons we see.
Yeah, I appreciate you organizing it into the 3 and then 4. It's a growing list, but yeah, there's many ways. Like I'm guessing that a lot of people are like me. When you hear about a business closing, it's most of the time it's like, oh, the business failed, like let's bring it to a close. But yeah, I totally wasn't thinking about like retirement or selling your business or like a part-time business, anything like that. So in general, if you are an entrepreneur who has made the decision for any of those reasons or any additional reasons to to bring your business to a close, what are some of the key things that you need to keep in mind and like you need to actually do so it's going to make your life easier going forward?
Yeah. So if you do decide that you're shutting down, there are two things that like there's a lot of things to do. So that's
hence the business.
Yes. Hence why we built
your business.
Yes. Just to give you a sense, like our average shutdown on our platform has about 95 moving parts to them. So that's just to give you like, the breadth of, so to lay out all 95 obviously makes no sense. And that's why we exist. But if you're a founder and entrepreneur and you've made the decision to shut down, or you're thinking about making a decision to shut down, I think there's like two pieces of advice that I have constantly given founders and entrepreneurs that are going through the process. Number one is don't try to do it yourself. And I'm not like trying to, convince you or anyone to use SimpleClosure. Like, go to a professional, a law firm, SimpleClosure, another company, whatever you want. But like, it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. The amount of horror stories where I've heard entrepreneurs and founders getting fines and penalties months and years after technically shutting down because they didn't do something properly, is just painful to hear. And so just don't do it yourself. That's the number one piece of advice. And then the second one I give a lot is shutting down costs money. And I'm not referring to like the fee of, in this case, maybe SimpleClosure, working with SimpleClosure. Like, there are state taxes, there are penalties, there's invoices that are typically owed out to vendors, there's taxes, payroll taxes that need to be, there's a final tax return that needs to happen. Like, shutting down costs money. So another big piece of advice I always give founders and operators are like, don't get to $0 in your bank account and then say, okay, now I'm going to shut down, because you're going to end up paying out of pocket. Or you could get in some like messy waters in terms of like, piercing the corporate veil, having personal liability and things like that. So make sure you have money set aside for a shutdown.
So as we hinted at before, of course you're in a very unique business, and as part of that, you have to be really unique with your marketing, because like you're you're kind of going against the grain for like what many people think about when they're starting a business. So like all they think about is the growth side of it, and you're talking about the side that nobody wants to think about, until it hits them in the face in many times, or maybe that's just for a different time in life. But from your standpoint in like the team, like actually like making a name for SimpleClosure and marketing yourself within the industry, how have you been able to do that and put together a compelling message that like people actually pay attention to, even if it's not exactly relevant for them in that moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I think about it like SimpleClosure, our like mission as a company is to become ultimately the TurboTax of shutting down. So when we talk about like the 700,000 to a million companies shutting down, we want to make sure that we've built a platform and a company that can handle that level of volume and be the brand name for shutting down. Like, our goal is to be the brand name. So if any company at any stage, at any scale, and any scale decides like, hey, I need to shut down, like SimpleClosure is top of mind. So that's what we're working towards, and that's what we're building towards. And in order to accomplish that, I think we're like learning from a growth and marketing perspective that it's all about two things. One, understanding that customers are going through a really painful experience right now and being empathetic about it. Like, I think that is something that really, really resonates in terms of our marketing messages, in terms of our motion, in terms of our branding. Like if you go to our website, like in a lot of materials, you'll literally see like one of our taglines, like, shutting down sucks. Like, we're not shying away from that. We're not like, we know, we've been through it. We're entrepreneurs, we're attorneys that have like on the team that have supported. And so I think like approaching everything on the marketing side with a perspective of empathy and a perspective of understanding and a perspective of like calling it out, like, this sucks, like, it sucks, like, you're in a low point in your company, you're in a low point in your career, this is not what you want to be dealing with, like, we're here to make it simple, therefore the name SimpleClosure.
I was gonna say, yeah. The wheels were turning on that one.
Yeah. I think that's a big lever in terms of like how we present the company and how we grow. And then I think the other thing that, from a marketing perspective is, it's about identifying, being in front of the customer at the right moment in time, right? When you're starting your company, you're not thinking about shutting down. You just started your company, you're excited, you raise money, when you're hiring your first employee, this is not what you're thinking about. So obviously we don't want to be marketing to those people at that moment in time, but there are moments in time in the trajectory of a business, and there's service providers and partners that are the first line of defense when an entrepreneur or business owner is thinking about shutting down, that they approach. And it's how are we making sure that we are in those places at the right time to be in front of them and be there, not only from like be at the right place at the right time, literally, is kind of how we think about it. And that's how we kind of have been spending our marketing and growth efforts and resources, being at the right place at the right time with the right message.
Yeah, and sometimes the message sucks, literally.
Yeah.
So looking back, like I know at the time of this recording, like it's still pretty early in the SimpleClosure journey, but in addition to getting kind of like the messaging right and having that focus on empathy, what would you say has been like another big driver of the scale so far?
I think we've had a lot of referrals, a lot. Our business is currently, again, we're early stage, but it's fueled by a lot of referrals. And I think that it's like people come to us because they spoke to a founder that's been through it. And the founder said, like, listen, they solved one of my biggest pain points. And so I think it goes back to like building a great product that users love, building a product that solves the pain point, and building mechanisms to allow your current customers to share their experience, to be able to talk about what they're going through. I think those have all been like levers for us.
So let's switch gears a little bit and get to some of the levers within you internally, we'll call it. Because there's a couple of things that have come out through the course of this interview I really want to dive into more. So this segment, we'll call it, it's inspiration and creativity. So kind of get into what drives you. And one of those things, I just really want to hear more of your perspective on what you were saying about with your, with the training for the ITF, and you were talking about kind of like the mind over matter thing. That's the kind of thing, like you hear that a lot about how like the mind can do so much more, or the body can do so much more than you think, like your mind tells you to stop early when really you can go on. And that's how there's people doing like ultra marathons and stuff like that. But
Yep.
From your experience, how do you get yourself to like keep going when you're just like, oh my God, I would love to, chill on the couch right now?
I don't get that a lot. I guess I'm the weird one. Like I think to some extent as a founder entrepreneur, you kind of have to be like in love with what you do and a workaholic. And so I very rarely get that like, oh, I just want to chill. I actually, love working, maybe too much. My wife hates it. But look, I think, you're pushed to like, if you get pushed to extremes and you see that there actually are no barriers, and it's, to your point, like mind over matter, then I think it just becomes a way of life to some extent, or it's become for me a way of life of like, it's not a barrier. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's not a matter, it's like, it's more of like, there's no boundaries. There's nothing that's not possible. I'm also a person that like very much like, there's no such thing as no. There's a different way to get the solution. There's like every no, or like, I don't know, it might sound cliche, but every no is one step closer to a yes. Like I'm a big believer of that. So I don't know. I think that's maybe shaped my professional career to some extent, and how I approach things and think about challenges.
Is there anything you do these days to kind of like remind yourself or like refocus yourself on like, okay, like we can do this, like we're going to build this, we're going to keep going forward?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't think there's like anything that comes to mind immediately on like that I do to myself. I think more like we're at a stage where, the team now is like 25-ish people, and I'm a big believer that like successful companies come about when there's like really good people that are like, good people build good companies. It's very hard to build a good company without good people. And so I constantly like am reminded of like how important like the people are that are driving the company and the business, and how do we make sure that they're motivated, and how do we make sure that they're aligned, and how do we make sure that like the team understands, like is excited about the same vision that that the founders are excited about sometimes. But I think, and again, I think like tactically the things that I think I've learned over time are like the more you share, the more motivated the team gets. There's some companies that kind of like people are in the dark and they don't know exactly, and the strategy's kind of hidden and no one knows the revenue numbers. I very much side toward like overshare. Like people are much smarter than you think. And when my wife always says this, when like people are more scared about what they don't know than what they know. Like, and so, yeah, I guess we shifted the question a bit in a different direction, but I don't know. That's where I went with it.
I'm scared of what could come of the next question because
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
No.
I'm scared
that's really
now
good.
because I don't know what you're gonna ask me. Right? If you would have sent me the questions in
Yeah.
advance, I would like.
Yeah.
I'd be more cooperative. No, I'm kidding.
No, that's a great answer. So can you do the alphabet backward? No, just kidding. I just want to throw a curveball at you.
Z-Y. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. The other aspect of kind of like mental and creativity that I wanted to ask you about was I heard a story of how you like brainstormed and came up with what was then an initial idea for SimpleClosure, and it involved Mexico and a whiteboard. Can you share that?
Yeah, you really did your homework.
Yeah, I just can't tell you how many businesses close every year, but besides that.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I had shared that, we had sold the last company. It was there were ups and downs, but ultimately we sold the company. And I wanted to get back to building. Where's that even written out? I don't know where you found that, but I'm interested to know where you found that. But anyways,
I may have heard it come up in another interview somewhere,
okay.
And I don't remember how much you talked about it, but all I heard was a Mexico brainstorm, and I was like, "Whoa, okay, I got to hear more about this."
Yeah. So, anyways, I was like ready to kind of go back to building another company, and I was passionate about it, and like I'm like, but it's a big decision to start another company, to build it's like a decision for the next, if it goes bad 5 years, if it goes good 10 years, like, so it's a monumental decision in your career, and I wanted to make sure, like, one, that was what I wanted to do, and two, if I start another company, what is that other company? What am I passionate about, and things like that. I had at the time, I think, 2 kids and a wife and life and everything, and so I still now have 3 kids. But
yeah, I was gonna say what? Yeah.
A wife and 3 kids. Yeah, and so. So obviously it's like a big decision, and I felt like I wanted to really have the opportunity to think about it in a very neutral environment where I'm like not dealing with the day-to-day. I'm not sidetracked. I'm really like focused on this life-changing decision and career defining decision and business defining decision. So I asked for permission from my wife to go to Mexico, and I don't know, just Mexico, because found a great resort and it was easy and anyhow, and kind of do a retreat for myself. Like it was the first company offsite. It was only myself.
Yeah, the whole team there.
I had the whole team there, 100% participation. I think it's still rated the best offsite to date from all the offsites we've done at the company. But pretty much did an offsite. And went to a hotel for almost a week, and literally like in a very neutral, vibrant environment where I had no responsibilities pretty much, really took time to like think about what I want to do next, and with, what does that look like? And so that was the whole trip, and it was great. And I actually came back from that trip with like the decision that, okay, I'm going to build SimpleClosure. And so it was funny. I ended up booking like a pretty nice hotel. And so like, I think like a week before going there, they had like a concierge service, and the concierge was like, he emailed me, "Hey, we're really looking forward to you coming, and blah, 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 blah. Is there anything we can prepare to make your stay like extra special?" And I'm like, yes, if you can, I would love like a whiteboard and markers in my room when I arrive, because and like that would be like make it extra special for me, because really, I was gonna like brainstorm and like trot out things and graphs and like flow charts and start to really think deep. And so that was the request I had. Flew to Mexico, arrived at the hotel. It wasn't waiting for me in the room. So I called like the concierge, like, dude, like there was one thing I asked for. This would be great. Like, if not, I'll just like go to Walmart and buy it, right? He's like, no, sorry, we forgot, we're bringing it over. And I literally think like they detached a whiteboard from like their internal office to bring it to me. And yeah, so I had a whiteboard and a few good solid days to think and brainstorm. And yeah, that was the whiteboard story.
Well, you nailed it. So I'm glad I could remind you of it. But all right, let's wrap things up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Okay, let's do it.
All right.
I'm scared.
Go. Yeah. Well, you should be. I'm scared too. I don't even know the questions yet. All right. First question. What from that Mexico trip, actually, what was the best either Mexican food or tequila? I'm not sure if you're a tequila drinker. Food or tequila. What was the best you had down there?
Okay. So, wow. One of the best like tacos I've probably ever eaten in my life, but I was at a very fancy resort. And like it was really expensive to eat anything there, and I'm like, fuck this, I don't want to be eating like this fancy resort, and it's probably not that good anyways. And so I literally asked, like I didn't ask at first. I went on Google and I'm like, what's the best taco in the area? And there was like this like 15-minute drive, hole in the wall, middle of nowhere, like, and I'm at like a fancy resort, gated community, blah blah blah. And so I actually literally asked the concierge if I could use their cars to drive me there because Ubers couldn't get into. And
this
so
concierge was coming up big for you.
Yeah. So I'm like in Mexico. It's like very poor part of the city, but that's where like the best street food is. I roll up with this like SUV Escalade black car. Like there's barely cars there. And like everyone's like looking, who's the guy pulling out of this? Like, you know, they think like the president of Mexico is coming to eat there. And anyways, that was like the best meal I had there. It was like a $3 full meal with everything included, and like so much better than anything else I eat at the hotel.
Oh my God. Yeah. Tacos never get old, especially when you're the president of Mexico. So congrats. But yeah. And they say street tacos are the best in Mexico. So you did it right. I'm going to have to interview this concierge because they really hooked you up with this.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of travel, well, for you, it was travel, but also living there. What's the most like beautiful part of Israel you've ever been to?
Ooh. I would probably say I really am in love with Eilat, which is the south of Israel. I think like the ocean there's like crystal clear blue waters, coral reefs, you have the mountains, you have the desert. Like I love that combination of like desert with beach. Like it's a very unique combination where you don't see in a lot of places.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, imagine like putting a beautiful ocean in Palm Springs. Like doesn't exist. Yeah.
You know, well, speaking of a different ocean, you spent lots of time traveling between Israel and California, so some long flights there.
Yeah.
What do you? I've asked this multiple times, but I'm always curious how people, spend the time on that. What's like your go-to advice for not getting like bored to death, or just bored to death on a long flight?
Well, I think there was like the answer to that is pre-internet and flights and post-internet and flights. Like pre-internet flights, like I didn't have a good solution. I would typically like try to stay up really late the night before, come really tired so that I sleep the majority of the flight. Yes, maybe watch a movie, read a book a bit, but like I get antsy on those things. Post internet in flights, like flights have gone by so much quicker. Like you connect to the Wi-Fi and it's like, you just get the adrenaline of work and you just work a full day. Buy internet and work. That's the answer.
Great advice from the king of business closures. Make sure you work. All right, and then last one. We mentioned battleships at the start, so we're going to come full circle.
All right.
Out of 10, what would you say your score is in terms of how good you are at like the game Battleship?
Ooh. I would have to give just because it's been probably 15 years since I played it, I'm probably a 5 now since it's been 50. I don't even remember the rules necessarily. I kind of remember with the red pins and the white pins, but I'm getting back into it. My daughter is like now 5, and so I played with her Guess Who this past weekend.
Oh yeah, with all the like caricatures of people.
Which I haven't played in years, and so if you ask me, probably in 2 years, 3 years, when like my kids grow a bit more, I'll probably be a better Battleship player.
Awesome. Well, you have the professional experience there as well. So
Exactly.
Dori, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Really appreciate what you do, and it I hope like me, like it makes listeners, viewers, like it totally changes how they think about closing down businesses. And I think it's, as you said, a breath of fresh air, a really good service that you're providing. So thank you so much for coming on. And I know if anybody wants to learn more about your business, they can do so at simpleclosure.com. And if they want to connect with you online, what's the best place to do that?
Email Dori at simpleclosure.com, LinkedIn, X, Twitter. I'm there. Try to be as responsive as possible. But again, the main thing is we're here to help founders and entrepreneurs. Is if you have to, statistically, by the way, a lot of people tell me, I hope I never need to see you again or talk to you again in my life. And then I'm like, I get it, but statistically we'll probably chat at some point.
Right.
So I say that in a way of we're here to help. We've seen so many edge cases and use cases, and we're here to be a sounding board. And if you just want to understand what it means and how to plan for it, we're here to help.
Well, you kind of stole my thunder, because I always like to ask about final thoughts last, and that was kind of like a perfect place to end it, and I'm ruining it as we speak. So I'm just going to make you say a few more words again. What's kind of words to live by, or just a final thought or a quote, whatever you want, just a little piece of advice, to a breath of fresh air for people to end with.
Yeah, going back to the last point,
see, I really screwed this up.
No, all good. No, look,
Okay.
We really see when you, especially if this is if there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening and founders and business owners listening, when you hear about a company selling and exits and all these beautiful, amazing stories, what people don't realize is the majority of them have failed multiple times before. Yes, once in a blue moon, there's a Mark Zuckerberg that out of college started a company, but most successful companies, they've failed multiple times on their path to success. And so that's honest truth. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's currently considered a taboo topic, but we're really trying to break the stigma there. There's nothing to be ashamed about. Every failure is one step closer to that success. We're here to make that as simple as possible so that you do reach that success that you're looking to accomplish. I think that's what I want to leave with.
Bring on the bongos!